And scientists have these amazing skills to change the world, but the world doesn't know why it needs to change. So being able to point out or to tell the story pulls in that people factor that is so important to build a business.
Welcome to the Food Grads Podcast, the podcast that takes you on a fascinating journey into the hearts and minds of the amazing people who work in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. My name is Veronica, and I am a PhD candidate studying fat-based food emulsions. On this podcast, we share insights from professionals at all stages of their careers, find out what they do, why they do it, and how they are changing the food world one day at a time. So no matter what your passion is, there's always something for everyone in food, and we'll help you find it. Hello everyone, Veronica here. I hope you're doing well. On today's episode, we are talking about the upcycling of brewer spent grains, the importance of storytelling when showcasing scientific innovations, and what it's like working at a startup. Our guest today is Rebecca Broadley, Chief Marketing Officer at Terra Bio Industries. Terra Bio Industries is a Canada-based startup helping to create a more circular economy with existing supply chains. They make highly sustainable products for the food, fermentation, and chemical waste industries, all while lowering food waste. Rebecca graduated from the University of Guelph with a degree in biology/biological science with a minor in biotechnology and a specialization in plant science. She went on to obtain a master's degree at the University of Guelph in biotechnology. She is a creative mind in the scientific community looking to showcase the value of scientific innovations in new and growing industries. Hello, Rebecca. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to this. How are you doing, Veronica?
I'm doing good. Hopefully, at least here in Canada, where we're recording these podcasts right now, in terms of the region, air quality hasn't been the best. So that has been a little bit concerning. Maybe not starting off on the best note, but it maybe brings into the talk of what you're trying to do in terms of circular, helping environment, all that type of stuff. So I'm going on a tangent. So thanks for coming on the show, Rebecca.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, you're totally right. In times like this, looking out the window and seeing the color of the sky change just from the smoke from wildfires, it really is motivational in a way. It's sad, but it's motivating us to try and change what we can where we can.
For sure, that's a really good point. And even just the fact that you can smell the air quality, it really does put into perspective. We got to start getting some solutions like right now. This isn't a 5 years in the future problem. This is like a now thing to happen. So crazy stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what? And we'll let that segue right into directly with what you're doing in terms of where you work. So tell us all about Terra Bio Industries and what your role is there.
I would love to. Terra Bio Industries is a clean tech company. It's a startup based out of Southern Ontario, right here in Toronto. And its goal is to try and save the world where we can. So we're actually a B2B company, and we want to make it easier for businesses, especially in the food industry and the biotech industry, make it easier for them to connect to the circular economy without having to reinvent their entire supply chain. Now, being B2B, it does mean that, we're able to work with some of the businesses, or we hope to work with some of the businesses you know and love. And our goal is to provide sustainable products for them so that the products that we consume as consumers are better for the planet, that we can know that we're purchasing things that aren't just taking, and instead are being produced with ethical and sustainable upcycling. So my role at the company is actually to help build the brand behind Terra Bio Industries and help tell the story. There's a lot of science that goes into upcycling and creating upcycled products for different businesses. So my goal is to translate it into everyday English so that that story can be told to the businesses and to their customers.
I love that. We're definitely going to make use of that skill in this podcast episode because I really want to dive more into the science and such of what you're doing. But for those who might be new to the term, circular economy, I think that was the term you used, it's still a fairly new term being used. So maybe you could just briefly talk to like how Terra Bio Industries is related to the circular economy and what that even means.
Of course, yeah. So circular economy, it kind of is what it sounds like in the sense that if you visualize our economy, typically we visualize a straight line starting from producers that produce a product or produce a raw good that goes to manufacturers that refine it, and then to advanced manufacturers, and then eventually that end consumer before it ends up in landfills. But a circular economy bends that straight line into a circle and is about cycling from outputs back into inputs so that what would be the dumping into landfills is actually being upcycled or recycled back into usable inputs. We've already seen that as consumers, we went from being throwing out plastic bottles and throwing out paper, and now it's extremely common. It's almost universal that people recycle these plastic and paper products. We can do the same thing with a lot of output, especially in the food industry, where we would traditionally just throw it into landfills or compost it. Instead, we can recycle it the way that Mother Earth has for millennia.
I love that you are like your company. I guess we'll say company. I love that it's looking as well as to business. I think that there's been a lot of focus on consumers, and I understand the need for consumers to recycle. It starts at home and such, but uh, under a lot of the impact is going to come from businesses. As good it is for consumers to be mindful, and we should continue to do that. Businesses also have to be a little bit more accountable for what they're doing, in of my opinion, because it's going to make a bigger impact. So it's great that you're creating a platform to help with this circular economy, to help businesses.
Totally. The interesting thing is we've seen that trend of consumers kind of looking back and pointing fingers at these companies, at the industry saying, "Hold on, we're doing the recycling, we're drinking with paper straws, but you're still, pumping out emissions or you're still creating a lot of the waste." And realistically, a lot of these companies actually do have sustainability goals in mind. Not all of them are just about, making a profit. A lot of them do want to change the world for the better. And I'm happy to say that up to 92% of surveyed businesses have said that lowering emissions, that being more sustainable is a priority for them. But of those 92%, 84% of them said it's just out of reach. A lot of the technology to make these more sustainable choices, make more sustainable products, are either outside of their control, outside of their scope, or just outside of their budget. So having businesses like Terra Bio Industries that want to make it more accessible and more affordable allows them to achieve their goals without going out of business.
And do you mind if I ask, what do they mean by out of reach? Like, what would be some of the examples for that?
So, if we look back at that linear economy that I was talking about, a lot of a carbon footprint for that end product at the end of that line, a lot of that carbon footprint will come throughout its lifeline or that timeline. So, it's not just the final manufacturer that makes that final product. A lot of the carbon emissions are going to come from the processor and the producer in those previous steps. So even though the manufacturer wants to make a more sustainable product, a lot of the emissions are outside of their reach. They can't do anything to control those, or it would require obscene amounts of resources to change the entirety of the previous supply chain.
Okay. Okay. So then in terms of how your organization is coming in, we've talked about how that you're supporting it, but let's start to get more into like the details or like the tangible. So would you be able to give more to specifics as to how your organization is helping out these other businesses?
Absolutely. So our main platform, the technology that we built our business around, is our upcycling platform. So it takes a lot of food waste, typically those that are rich in either plant matter or naturally rich in proteins. We really look into the biochemistry of this waste product, and we'll break down that waste into its more valuable components. So if it's rich in protein, we'll isolate out those proteins. If it has a lot of fiber or sugar, we can break it down into very simple sugars and provide those sugars for the fermentation industry, another highly sustainable industry. Our goal is to take what would be a food waste from one processor or producer and prevent it from going to the landfill, and instead bend that line into a circle and cycle it back into an input for a manufacturer. So one way we do this, while the platform can be used on multiple byproducts, we actually perfected it for brewers' spent grains. So if there's a few things in life that are certain, death, taxes, and beer. So almost anywhere in the world you can find breweries. So there's a lot of spent grains that come out of beer production, almost 40 million tons every year, actually.
Wow. Wow.
So these are perfectly edible grains. The only thing that is, I suppose, wrong with them is that they were used for their sugars. So the sugars were extracted for the beer to feed the beer and give it its flavor. And so what's left is that fiber and protein. Perfect. We can break open that fiber and access that protein, dry it down into a protein ingredient. Again, perfectly edible, a nutritious ingredient for the food industry. And then that fiber and any residual sugar is broken down into simple sugars and concentrated and sent to the biotech industry, where the fermentation industry has been asking and asking for upcycled sugars, for cheaper sugars to be as sustainable as possible.
Wow. It's crazy how there's something from a process like beer making that they're leaving out some they're obviously for their process it's not necessary to make beer with protein in the sense, but it's just going to waste and that's one of the biggest things that people look for in terms of diets. Well, a lot of people do fiber and protein and just to have that being thrown to landfills, it's kind of crazy and it really just goes to show how important now if we're going to start addressing food waste and upcycling all these things that collaboration and working together is really the key because yes, maybe it's not important to the brewers, but when it comes to someone else, that is a value product right there.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is a lot of these breweries are and have been looking at their byproducts like that brewer's spent grain and wondering how they could improve it. Obviously, again, it can be outside of their scope. They need to be able to run a successful business, one that makes more money than it spends. And if you have to spend too much money on your byproducts, you're not gonna survive. So, they have found solutions that up until now, they have been working. In fact, while some brewer spent grain does end up in landfills because, let's face it, this stuff, it's hot and it's filled with nutrients, it spoils within hours. So,
Oh, I
if it
didn't know
starts
that.
yeah, once it starts stinking, you just gotta get it out of there. Nobody wants to be in a stinky brewery. But if they're close enough to farms, they actually do send it to farms to feed livestock. So farmers get this nutritious source of protein and fiber for their livestock, and there's studies that have shown that it's great for them. The only issue is there are better types of feed out there for livestock now. I mean, I'm from the University of Guelph, and we've got that whole dairy college where they
Mhm.
focus on how to feed cows so that they produce less emissions. And Brewers Spent Grains unfortunately produce a lot of emissions from livestock. So while it seems like a great use of it, it's still producing a large amount of carbon emissions, more so than if you were to upcycle this material, and almost just as much emissions as if you were to throw it in a landfill. So, if you know a more efficient way to use it, such as upcycling, where it gets cycled back, the breweries actually get to benefit from this. They valorize a byproduct without actually having to do the work themselves. They get a competitive advantage saying that they can find more sustainable solutions. They get to lower their carbon footprint as the business. And some of them can even profit from this because if there is enough demand, they could be a competitive supplier of their brewer spent grains.
So tell me, how did Terra Bio Industries start? Because it seems like this is a great idea. Was it Like, I know that it was founded by your founders, but like, where did this idea come from? Maybe you could walk us a little bit through that beginning journey of the startup and tell us more about how that came to be.
Totally. It's actually kind of a funny and long and complicated story. So I'll do my best to summarize it as much as I can. But
Hmm.
you had mentioned the co-founders. The co-founders are Steve, George, and Ricardo Martinez, and they've been longtime friends. But they've also been longtime colleagues and coworkers, so it actually worked out really well. Originally met at the University of Waterloo. They were both doing graduate degrees in chemical engineering, and like scientists and like engineers, they kept asking, "How can we do things better? Why do we do things this way? Let's deconstruct it and reconstruct it. Let's reinvent the wheel 20 different times." So they would do that a lot during their graduate studies, and that's kind of where they toyed around with the idea of finding better uses for food waste, and they started to learn about bioreactors. Obviously, their bioreactors are well known in the pharmaceutical industry, but they're also becoming a major tool in the food industry. So they wanted to see, okay, can we use some of this scientific knowledge to upcycle things in a bioreactor, maybe use it for fermentation, whatnot. They toyed around with all these different ideas. Eventually, they both had to graduate and get big kid jobs. So they both actually ended up landing jobs in different areas in a large global pharmaceutical company. Steve was or still is the bioprocess like team lead. So he helps to create things on the bench level and scale them up. Whereas Ricardo's on the other end, where you're scaling up to commercial. So really bringing things into their final facility, scaling it up to that commercial size, industrial size. So they had things kind of hand in hand, start to finish in a way, but they would still get together on the weekends as friends and chat about all their different ideas, revisit those ideas they had in university. And I've actually asked them about this today, what kind of motivates them as entrepreneurs, because not everybody is an entrepreneur, especially not every scientist, right?
Hmm.
So what motivated you for this? And they say it's really that trying to save the world feeling that we are responsible as scientists, as people that have this knowledge that know how to upcycle. We need to work to create solutions. It's on us. And we need to make those solutions easily adoptable. So they toyed around again with that fermentation idea. Oh, let's take different things and upcycle it. And while over sharing a beer, they realized, hey, there's waste from beer production. Let's upcycle that, feed some microorganisms, and see what the microorganisms can grow. And because they're chemical engineers, everything had to be reinvented, including how they processed those grains to feed the microorganisms. They spent so much time figuring out the best way to process the material that that's almost all they did. They realized that there was so much work that went into the preparation of what is treated like a waste material that there could be an entire business built around just that fermentation companies would not be able to do this on their own. So they sat down and they put together all of their ideas for how you can upcycle to create a usable feedstock for fermentation and what else you can get from this. They realized there was so much in the spent grains that it wasn't just the sugars, there was also these amazing proteins. So we could create two products. So maybe we should just stop at the upcycling part and selling those products and be that missing link to make upcycling more achievable for businesses in fermentation and food.
Wow. I knew you condensed it down, and I can just imagine. I mean, you brought it down into like a few sentences, but I know behind those sentences that there is just in so much work behind the scenes, that there's so much ideation, so much trial, so much error. Because one of the things that even I struggle with is doing like my PhD, being a scientist on the benchtop, is that going from benchtop to scaling, that is its own set of challenges right there. Like, it's very not easy, but we'll do these scientific studies and we'll say, oh, we made this, but then you look at the sample size and it's like 50 grams, and then translating that to even a full liter to 2 liters to then being commercially viable. Like those are very difficult steps that take a lot. And it's good that there's engineers, because I feel like that's the switch. Sometimes the engineers kind of bring it to the big scale, that they were able to do this. Like that is no small feat, and it's smart on their end that they were able to recognize the big picture of the solution to, let's focus on this aspect but grow it from there, because that in itself is a problem. Because for a lot of manufacturers that are moving, processing, grabbing their ingredients, they don't have time to recreate, like you were mentioning with the brewers. Like they don't have the time to create like a whole new product line in that sense. Maybe some do that are on the big scale, but yeah, no small feat that what they were able to even take that process and actually fulfill it out.
Yeah, I'm amazed by them every day, and we continue to optimize the process as well for Brewer's spent grains. We've got something that we really love that we know that works, but we know that we can optimize it for other side streams as well. So you'd mentioned that there's probably a lot going on behind the scenes that led up to this. And as a little teaser, there are a lot of other byproducts that we have tested and continue to test with the same upcycling platform, and I'm really excited to see the future products and the expansion of that product line that we have. It's almost hard to rein it back and just focus on our current process and our 2 products when you know what's to come, but
Mhm.
that's where the business sense tries to come in, right? You keep your scope reasonable and make sure that you become an expert and you nail down the first thing before you take on 5 other projects.
For sure. And do you mind me asking as well? So you mentioned about brewer spent grains, and there's a lot of different kinds of beers. So I would assume that there's a lot of different types of grains. Has that come into consideration throughout your business model? Have you had to change how each grain is processed depending on the variety, or is it? I guess where coming with is it very more homogeneous, the product that you're helping to distribute out? Depending, or is it very dependent on the grains that you're getting from the brewers that you're getting it from?
This is a more of a complex answer. So, yes and no. So, yes, there are a ton of different types of grains that are used. There's a ton of different brewing processes that are used. There's different ways that they handle that off product, that byproduct. So, we've had to investigate the entirety of our suppliers' product life cycle as well as what our customers would do. And so, we've almost had to reinvent the entire value chain in a way. So we've thought about it. We have. And there's a ton of science behind it, I'm sure. I'm the marketer though, so I like to look at the easy way. And the easy way to explain it is we do have a certain requirement for what type of spent grain we accept. We like to use barley rich spent grain. So this is around 80% barley and 20% could be wheat, rice, corn, uh, other types of grains that create different flavors. But the main goal is that 80% barley because that's where the majority of our protein will come from. And that allows us to have a more consistent nutritional profile at the end. Consistency is the key for our final product. Our protein ingredient and our sugars need to match what the spec sheet says they are.
Mhm.
So the entire process, I keep referring to this upcycling platform, and it's a string of multiple processes. There's a lot of steps that go into it. I can't go into it though because it
Yeah.
is proprietary, but luckily, there's enough steps and enough modifications to those steps that allow us to have a very, ubiquitous product. Everything is the same in
Okay.
it's gonna match the spec sheet. So, yes, there is an issue with that variety, but no, it's not an issue for us anymore.
Gotcha. Okay, that's what I was looking for. I had a feeling that's what I was gonna get out of that answer, but I just wanted to hear that, I know, although you can't say that is in itself like very, that's difficult. It's there's a lot of steps and processes behind it, and it's not, the fact that you can do it just is a testament to the fact that there's been a lot of thought put into this and a lot of solutions that have come from it.
Absolutely.
And taking a step back, because you did mention you're in marketing, although it's great talking about Terra Bio Industries from that perspective, like I wanted to talk more about you. And before this conversation, we talked a little bit about you are working in a startup. You do have a science degree. You did do a master's degree, but yet you're in marketing. Like I would love to talk a little bit more about you and your career. Like how did you end up doing a marketing job when you did a master's in science? Like how did that happen?
It's fell from the sky in the most beautiful way, but I would also be lying if I said that I didn't plan it this way and try to make sure that I ended up in a role similar to this. Yes, I did a science master's degree, but it was actually a very unique master's degree that married science and business. I had done my bachelor's in science and biology, and I focused on plant biology in particular, but I wasn't totally in love with all of the lab work that came along with doing a science degree, but I really loved the presentation side of things and getting to show my work and working with scientists who had these really great ideas and helping them kind of build out that strategy to it. And could this be a business? But I was still in my bachelor's degree. So I wasn't entirely certain where to go with this. And when I was looking for a master's degree, I wanted to maybe do some self reflection as to what strengths do I bring to the table other than I can get a good grade in science. And that was, again, my presentation skills, my ability to write out a story to a scientific innovation. So it was that scientific communication. So is there a way I could maybe take my science skills outside of the lab? And the University of Guelph had this program, the Masters of Biotechnology. And at the time, it was only a year or two old, and they only accept 20 students every year. So this was a very small program, very new. And they described it as a way to bridge science and business. So science students can join this master's program and they will get some business training and you'll have lectures with real business professionals and case studies coming in. They'll expose you to either a scientific innovation that needs to be branded or a brand that needs to explain their scientific innovation. So you got to kind of strut your stuff with your 19 other peers. And then at the end of this program, you do pretty much a co-op placement in a way or a degree project where you would get to work 4 to 8 months with one of these businesses or one of these scientists. So you'd apply for it the way you would a normal job, and then you get to work at that placement, make the biggest splash that you can with your unique mix of science, business, know-how, and then you get to graduate with this degree that nobody has ever heard of, but everybody needs. So it was a really unique opportunity, and that was actually how I ran into Terra Bio Industries. They had presented as one of the businesses that were looking for a student, and I loved the science of it, I loved the story of it, I saw the potential in it, but to respect for, the co-founders, again, really brilliant, but their PowerPoints needed a lot of work, and I felt like the story needed some tweaks. So in my cover letter and in my interview, I said, "Hey, let me use some of my abilities to create good presentations, to have a good scientific communication skill, and help you brand." And they said, "Sure, yeah, we'll take you. We're just a bunch of scientists, and we'd love to have that creative aspect brought in." And they haven't been able to get rid of me since.
That is amazing. I love that first of all, the opportunity, it came, but then you still put in, you recognize what skills that you could provide for them. And the thing that I have to point out that really stood out to me was the fact that you said storytelling. It was something you said a few times. And I think that it's a very important thing in terms of something that scientists might not think about, or even as students and undergraduates, thinking about the story in in when we're trained to be scientists, we're trained to very much facts. Here are the facts. If you do not know what the fact is, you say it's possible, it's a maybe, it's this is what it is. If I don't know, I don't know what it is, but here's a statistic to prove it. But storytelling is how most of the world works. That's how you sell a business. Like even how you presented when you first came on the podcast talking about Bioterra Industries, like I understood that you understood that storytelling is so important. And I really it's amazing how you were able to identify that as you have that science skill and marry the two together, because I think that's also a big thing that's critical right now is that scientists need to be better communicators. So I love that you recognize that and you just went for it and look where you are now.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I always think that there's such a human aspect that is brought to the table when you really hone into that storytelling behind a business or behind an innovation, and I was asking the co-founders today what's kind of been that motivation to make you take on entrepreneurship, and some were saying, "Oh, it's that drive or that call to action that we are responsible for our future and for our children's future." One of them is a father of 2, and so he always talks about how his when he looks at his sons, he sees a need to do better by them, and that invokes more emotion than just saying, "Oh, we have this innovation that does this, and that's the first time ever that it's ever happened. This is groundbreaking." So make sure that you're able to tell them something that speaks to them. And honestly, I will say the best way to learn what speaks to them is to listen to their stories. Ask them what matters most to them or what they're putting out in the world. And that way you can better inform how you can tell your story in a way that makes sense.
It's becoming a little more accessible for startups, for entrepreneurship, like for individuals who maybe might have not thought to start a business, that there's a lot more tools and community that's present. Like, I mean, obviously, look at the program that you were with the University of Guelph, connecting students to startups, building those connections that they can start bringing in people, reaching out with platforms and such, that it's really a new opportunity for those who are maybe more technically coming up with the solutions, because sometimes unless you're in the thick of doing a really advanced degree, or if you are really, you're in manufacturing and you've had those work year experiences and such, maybe before it wasn't as accessible to get things started, but now there's a lot more tools that are available. And I hope that this showing and sharing stories like what you just did with Terra Bio Industries, that it might inspire some others to say, hey, I noticed that this needs a solution, because this, like something with food waste, it might not be something that someone who doesn't have a science degree, they might observe it, but maybe just making that actual jump into actually coming up with the fermentation processes, all those types of things that you need a scientist to come in. But essentially, it's just saying that it's becoming more accessible and being able to connect people with different backgrounds as well. Like, I just think it's really good. And I think that we need more solutions to come out that are very specific. Like you said, you don't have to solve all the world's problems, but if you can go into it and just solve that one, if we can start involving more people into these smaller issues, eventually it'll come to maybe, push everything forward and start addressing these bigger issues of food waste. So bringing that percentage down and down and down of how much we waste.
Absolutely. And again, I don't always like to refer to just statistics and numbers, but I did bring up that 92% of those businesses, right? They're looking for solutions. It's a big priority for them. So maybe if we listen to their stories or what they want to achieve, you might be able to figure out how you can solve that and use your existing skills as a scientist. I do want to say too, though, you don't have to come up with the solution yourself. I know there are a lot of scientists or students in science who want to make that transition, maybe outside of the lab, or want to see what they do in the lab making a greater impact. You don't have to be the person that creates that upcycling platform or, creates the cure, but you can still use your skills to help those that, maybe have put the initial steps in place and help them bring it outside of the lab. So as students, for example, we at the University of Guelph in that master's degree, we were directly put in front of these businesses that already knew that they needed help. But there are ways to, as a student in a different program, have a similar opportunity. Every university has an innovation hub or something similar where they want to nurture these brilliant ideas that come from their students, that come from their faculty. They nurture these ideas, give them the resources that they need to help them perhaps start a small business or to sell or license that technology and bring some money in for themselves. It shows how successful that university was. So if you're a student and you maybe want to help save the world but don't know how, reach out to that innovation hub. Reach out to the accelerator platform for your city or your university and say, hey, I'm interested in these areas. I have this background or I have these skills. I would love to see if there's a business I could maybe help out.
That's really, huh? That's a really interesting thing to think about. I always suggest networking, reaching out on LinkedIn, and all those types of things. But honestly, I forget about these smaller innovation hubs that are maybe also not even just food focused. They might just be innovation hubs. So they deal with tech, they deal with, okay, tech's the only thing I can think of, but there's definitely more. There's definitely more than that in terms of innovation. But, maybe people coming in with the food or like fashion. I don't know. That's a really good place to look because you never know what you're going to see and you might get inspired and you thought, "Hey, I never thought about that. That's just interesting." And it might even just lead to great conversations.
Exactly. I know that one of the businesses that was part of the innovation hub for Guelph was a business that sourced produce directly from farms and brought it as a grocery delivery service. We've seen a million grocery delivery services out there, right? But this one was different in the sense that it was local farms or home farms, people that grow their own produce, and it would be produce that wouldn't really make it to groceries. So that reject that's a smaller niche of that grocery delivery service. So again, there's still competition out there, but this was one that was happening right in Guelph with people that you knew in Guelph. You could get information on what farm it came from and how it was grown and all that. And I can tell you right now that there are people in the city of Guelph that would love that. And so this was a business that was started by a 19-year-old from the University of
Oh
Guelph.
my gosh.
They weren't going to be able to do this by themselves. And so they went to that innovation hub, and that innovation hub said, we've got some business grads, we've got some plant ag grads. Let me just send out some emails. And some of them even go to the co op office and try to find placements that way. So they did a matchmaking process, and she ended up finding her business partner.
That's awesome. Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, let's take a quick break and hear a word from our friends at the University of Guelph. The University of Guelph is like no other university in Canada. It is a research-intensive and learner-centered place where campuses span urban hubs and rural communities. The University of Guelph offers over 80 undergraduate programs, over 100 graduate and postdoctoral study programs, co-op opportunities, continuing education opportunities, and diploma programs. They focus on the whole student and provide graduates with the tools and skills needed to make a difference in our ever-changing world. As you can see firsthand from this episode, the University of Guelph helped Rebecca pave the pathway needed to help start her career. Today, she is helping to make a meaningful difference in the world, demonstrating how having a great education can set the foundation to that pathway for your career. If you're interested to learn more about the University of Guelph and their amazing programs, then head over to the Education Partners tab on the Food Grads website, and you can click on the University of Guelph, or just check out the show notes in this episode. Thank you for that. Let's jump right back into the episode. And for you, how has it been working? That's a question I get asked is many people think about working for large companies. It's a lot easier to, see how you fit in with a large company. You do your role and you can progress up the ladder and such. But of course, working with the smaller startup and such, it's a much more dynamic place. Like, how has that been for you? What's it like?
I get asked that a lot because I do actually still keep in contact with the master's program. I come in as a little bit of an example. We still look for students that way. So I get asked that a lot. And the easiest way to break it down is going over the pros and cons. And I'm going to go over the cons first, the pretty obvious ones. With a startup, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of risk. There's also that issue that the risk a lot of times comes around finances. So there's going to be issues with payment. You might not be able to get a paid position right away. So you better love the idea enough to maybe dedicate and get value in other ways other than just monetary compensation. Or maybe you are getting paid, but it's, below market rate or even as low as minimum wage. Um, you may feel that the hours can be unpredictable. Sometimes they're really long. Sometimes you feel like you're not contributing. There are a lot of cons, obviously, with any job and with startups. There's a lot of cons that are associated with that risk. But then there's a lot of really unique pros. So a lot of times, if you're working for a startup, it's because you really fell in love with that startup. You drank the Kool-Aid, so to say. And so you're already doing something that you're passionate about. And I can say, as somebody who has I've had part-time jobs, minimum wage jobs, I've had full-time jobs. It can be hard to really love what you do. And so if you love what you do for a startup, that's already a big win. You're doing something you really believe in. Now, the other really big pro is while you may not be getting paid as an executive, you could be working an executive role. You could be a fresh graduate right out of school, but if you're contributing to the core team, once you take off, guess who's going to be their strategic lead, their strategy lead, or the director of operations, or their chief marketing officer? So you already get a head start against your peers. You just have to make it happen. So, and then that third pro is you are really in control of what happens. There there are a lot of things that kind of will be outside of your control, but as an entrepreneur, you can make things happen. You can make the business grow, your professional growth, your business growth, your financial growth. It's really up to you and your core team, a team that you will grow really close to. So there's a lot of benefits to young professionals joining startups because you get to create that role that you want, grow with that role, and build that future that you want, whether it be at an executive role or maybe you want to start another business down the line. A startup really gives you the opportunity to learn, build those tools, and reach your goals with a company that you get to show on your resume right away.
Those are really good points. Thank you. And thank you for breaking it down in the pros and cons and not just giving me the pros, although it could be very easy to do that. But I've heard about that before in terms of working for a startup or a small company is that you really get to see where your actions, the direct outcome of an action that you make. Maybe in a bigger company, if you have an off day, there's a lot of more people who can compensate for it. So you might not notice it as much. But when you're in a smaller company, you'll notice what you do, and whether that's having an off day or even just working together as a team and just seeing that idea go, seeing how maybe that particular um, marketing campaign went, or seeing how that particular product that you made, it's very rewarding. I've heard that aspect.
Absolutely. Your actions, you see that return on investment pretty much right away with every new hire you bring on a startup because you're going to see how their actions add to the business. Again, like adding to that marketing campaign or adding to the rate of development or just even adding to ideas for strategy. Every person that you bring onto the team is going to make a noticeable impact simply because of that size. And so it's really nice to have a diverse team where each person can truly shine and they can feel like they're really contributing because giving people that room and that ability and that support really allows them to grow into their role. I'm speaking from experience here where I've had to learn a lot and it would seem almost intimidating or too much to handle. But the co-founders really invested in me. I would get access to amazing resources, incubators, mentors. And then anytime I did try something, I get to see it in action and then the immediate positive response from it. Or if it's a negative response, it's a learning opportunity. I try again, now I get a positive response. It is so motivating. And I've had family members say that they're super proud of me, even though a post only gets maybe a few likes, or, you know, I go to an event and nobody knows who we are. Afterwards, they do. And they know who I am. And it was my post that was posted. So it you get to really, really make a splash and learn so much from it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I just was thinking, I was thinking about those types of aspects, and I was going to ask you, did you find any, like, did you find it difficult to come into this? Like, how do I want to put this? Did you find going into this type of group really challenging for you, or did you find that it was, you adapted fast, or was there something that was a little hard for you that you had to work on more, like a skill, or maybe just how you felt in the role?
We are always working on things, but I'd have to say with my team, it really just clicked. And that's they say that the team is the most important part of a business, especially a small business or a startup. That is 100% true. Your business only stands if it has team members holding it up. And so bringing on a new member when I was joining, we were really trying to see it almost like a personality test in a way, if we would click, if we were complementary. That's a big one because the co-founders have been so complimentary. If I'm joining the team, and I had a peer joining with me as well, she's still with us as well. We both pass because we were able to complement their existing skills, but also we benefited off of each other's ideas, the way we communicate, the way we collaborate. So joining the team is it's just collaboration and almost like a coexistence to build this thing that you love was really key.
And did you find, when we say the word collaboration, I think most of us have these very poor experiences in our university where we do a team project and like 3 out of the 4 people just like never show up until the last hour before it's due. So you don't really get to have that true aspect of like team building or collaboration. Is that what it's like? Okay, I know it's not. That's what it's like. Okay, let's get that out there. But like, what does collaboration look like? Is it getting together in a room just talking? Is it having an open space? Like how does collaboration look like?
All of the above. We collaborate any way that we can, and then we go off and we'll do independent work and then come back and bring it all together. I think the key again, it's that complementation, being able to complement each other, and everybody has a role to play. Now, when you join a startup or if you start a company, you're going to have to do far more outside of just a typical role. You might have to do the job of multiple roles or all of the roles. But once you start to build out that team, you'll notice that there are certain people that can perform certain responsibilities better than others. And that starts to become their key skill, what they bring, especially to collaboration. And again, joining as a young professional and being able to hone in on these skills, it's amazing that after being with this company, even just for the first 6 months, I was really treated with a lot of respect when it came to creative decisions. We would collaborate and then they would ask, "Oh, Rebecca, what do you think about this?" Or, "Should we do things this way?" If I said something related to, branding, for example, or colors, my decision held a lot of weight because they respected what I was good at. "Oh, yep, we can trust her." Yeah. And then if I have questions about supply chain, for example, or partnerships, I know I can go to Steve George and ask him, "What do we think about this?" We get the whole team's opinions, and then Steve will say, "Yep, and in conclusion, this." Yeah. So collaboration is great because everybody feels that they can share their ideas and that even if we can't come to a solid conclusion, there's always one person that we can really rely on to bring a solid solution.
I love that. And do you have any advice if someone was to, like, how they should come to the table if they have ideas? Like, what's a good way, like, if a student just came into, or a new graduate came into a role and they're looking to excel or figure out how they fit in, like, what would be your idea? What would be your advice for first steps in order to help present themselves, to help bring value?
To present yourself in a professional setting and to really map out a role for yourself. You want to kind of carve out your own little space in that team, make yourself extremely vital to how the team runs, but know again that you are able to bring a certain niche value. I would say that there's kind of I refer to them as like the magic 3, and you wanna find, uh, either honing in on each of those magic 3, or if there's a perfect epicenter between all of those, then great. But the magic 3 are, what kind of work are you good at? And you can think about the work that you've done in school. What kind of work or what subject were you best at? People maybe have told you, "Hey, you're really good at this." Maybe in a lab, you're, like, really good at organizing the lab and keeping it super clean. People tell you that, so you know that you're good at that. And then the second one is, what work can you do quickly? What are you really fast at doing? And not just fast as in, okay, it's a quick patch job, but fast as in you can start and complete a task faster than most people can. Maybe you're really quick at math. You're really good at putting together a really good spreadsheet and getting mathematical or financial answers. Maybe you're really quick at making a slide deck and it looks good. Or maybe you're just really good at writing fast. You can come up with ideas and write them down really fast. And then that third one is, what work do you find fun and enjoyable? Because you're gonna have to self-motivate. So what task are you like, "Yeah, I wanna do that." So maybe it's presenting. You really love presenting, you get a high off of that, or you really love research. So by knowing those magic 3, when you come to the table, you can say, "Hey, I'm really good at this. I think I can contribute by doing this, taking this off your plate because I can get it done faster. And I really love doing this. So if you have tasks like that, I'd love to take them on." I'll give you an example for myself, how I approached when I was applying. I had I knew what my hobbies were already, so I kinda knew, what soft skills or additional skills I was bringing to the table as a creative. I did some graphic design, I did video editing, I made websites, all that just for fun. Uh, my fellow nerds out there who maybe like watching video games on YouTube or watching Twitch streams or whatnot, that maybe you've dabbled in kind of that area a bit when it comes to graphic design, video editing. So find ways that your hobbies can become work skills, and I knew right away. So my key 3 were, I was really good at presenting or storytelling or creating a storyline right away. Video editing, and I got really good marks on presentations in school. I was really fast at event preparation. I knew that if there was a group project coming up, I could coordinate everybody really fast. I was under pressure, really motivated to perform in a way. With streaming and whatnot, you have to prepare right before you go live, so that kind of preparation I knew I was really fast at that. And then I really enjoyed that creative, almost artistic side of things of brand development. On the side, I did graphic design, but then for school, I was also making the graphics for my presentations that people said were so good. So those were my magic 3. I brought them to the table. I said, "Hey, I'll do your presenting because I think I can be the best at it. I'm gonna handle the pitches from now on." Great. They made me the face of the company. And then I'm really good at event preparation. So if we're in a pinch and we get a great opportunity, send me out, I'll nail it. So that I get sent to a lot of our in-person industry events. And then with the creative aspect, I'm our brand developer and I work on our website. So I'm already working on another version for our website. I create every slide deck for everybody. So I get to do things that I enjoy, that I find fun, and I get paid to do it. So in summary, the magic 3.
I love that. I love that. Oh, it's so good. And I just love how you brought in extra things that aren't just work, like coming in from your personal life, that things you might not even think about your hobbies. Maybe if you're really into volleyball and you can start bringing in those aspects that you love about that, and like you're more than just your work, but a lot of your outside hobbies can complement your work. So it's really good that you brought those in. And of course, I love the video game stuff. I think that might resonate with a lot of people, but Unfortunately, Rebecca, we are at the end of our call, and thank you so much for sharing all that in terms of the advice. I think that's something that's great. And I just love all the topics that we touched upon today in terms of the circular economy, startup culture, and, building your own career. And of course, you providing all this and how you relate to it. So, thank you so much for coming on the show. And before I let you go, I'm going to ask you two questions. What's next for Terra Bio Industries, and where can people find you?
Absolutely. So, what's next for Terra is we are working on commercializing our products. We've been hinting at this sustainable food product and a sustainable biotech product. And I'm happy to say that if you are looking for a nutrient dense protein ingredient, our food ingredient, Proteina, is ready for commercialization next year. So if you want to get your hands on it, you can reach out to me and we'll send you a sample. You'll be able to try it out. And if you are interested, you can become one of our early product developers where you get free access to Proteina up until commercialization to create as many recipes as you want. And then if you're in the biotech industry, especially those fermentation companies, and I know you're out there, there's 100 of you coming out every single day. We've got this completely upcycled sugar. It's called recyclose, and it looks like table sugar, but it is 100% upcycled. And it is also available in samples today. So if you're interested, you want to try it out, we'll get you some samples, and then it'll be available next year along with Proteina, both of which are going to be available at competitive prices to traditional protein ingredients for Proteina, as well as table glucose for recyclose. So these are things you can adopt without changing your costs, and it's going to be a great way for you to lower your carbon footprint. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can catch me on LinkedIn at Rebecca Bradley, or you can look us up Terra Bio Industries Inc. on LinkedIn, or you can go to our website, terrabioindustries.com, and reach out to us there.
Wonderful, and I'll make sure to link everything that you said in the show notes to make it an extra layer of easiness for everyone who's listening. So once again, thank you, Rebecca, so much for coming on the show, sharing what you and your team do, and sharing with us what you're going to be doing. I'm really excited for the next steps and everything, and I'm excited to see you continue to grow. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Veronica. This was great.
That was episode 77 of the Food Grads podcast. All the notes to this podcast can be found by clicking on the Student and Grads tab on the Food Grads website. There you can find any notes to past or future episodes. Did you enjoy this episode? Then please let us know on your favorite podcast platform. It helps us to spread the word about this podcast and get the word out about how great this industry is. Well, that was a great episode. I really enjoyed speaking with Rebecca and learning how she essentially created her own job. There's a saying that you should follow your passion, which I am not fully behind that idea personally, but hear me out. I think people have this idea that there's this dream job out there, and I get the idea because I feel as though so much of our media portrays that there's some kind of dream job, dream thing that you're supposed to do, but I don't really think that's the case. I'm more of the camp of believing that you should build up your skills, and by building up your skills, you open up new opportunities. And it's through building up these skills that you're able to develop something that you really love to do. There's so many new and upcoming jobs that just didn't exist 2 years ago. So to think that you could come up with a dream job, it doesn't really make sense to me. Have you ever personally experienced that feeling of falling in love with something after you got kind of good at it, whether it be a hobby or something in your actual work? I think passion should more so come from the idea of trying to tackle the themes of problems. So the values. So maybe you want to help improve the environment. Maybe you want to improve food safety. Maybe you want these types of things. So I think once you address the values that are important to you, you start naturally working on the things that can help you work towards it. And I think as you start to combine those and intertwine them, I think that's where you start to find career happiness, is when you are able to align your values with the skills, with the things that you're good at. It takes time. Not everyone knows, but I think it's a better way of going about things and it doesn't make you as stressed. But I mean, look at Rebecca. She was able to combine her skills of science, so the things that she learned in school, with her skills of marketing, storytelling, and then her values about trying to help address the climate crisis. Because she was able to build up skills, she was able to create a new position, and she was able to find something that she really loves to do. I guess where I'm basically going with this is don't forget to follow up your passion with skills that you need to do your job. And that's where you can find the intersection of doing something that you love, but also something that you're good at. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you everyone so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.